The air inside the hydroponic bay smelled of damp soil and growing things, a smell that felt out of place on a warship. The Galactic Council's flagship, Harmony's Edict, was a city of cold metal and soft light. But here, in this one room, life was allowed to show itself. It was a project for the children of the diplomats who lived on the ship, a symbol of peace and sharing. A little girl named Myri was on her knees in front of a small planter box. She was 8 years old. Her black hair was tied back, but a few strands stuck to her cheek. Her entire world, right then, was a single green shoot poking out of the brown soil. It was a sunflower seed from Earth, and it had just sprouted. She carefully poured water from a tiny cup at its base, her tongue poking out in concentration. At a few steps away, leaning against a support beam, was Taeyong. He was a big man, not just tall but wide in the shoulders. He wore the simple, dark uniform of the Human Diplomatic Security Team. His hands were relaxed at his sides, but his eyes were never still. They moved from Myri to the door to the other 2 children in the garden, a slender blue being from the Talkyri and a small, furry Urdian, and back to Myri. His face was calm, a flat, placid lake. But if you looked closely, you could see the awareness in his eyes. He missed nothing. He was there because humans were new to the Galactic Council, and not everyone was happy about it. Humans came from a world the Council called a death world. This gravity was strong. This weather was violent. Its life forms had fought a brutal war for survival for millions of years. To many of the older, more delicate species, humans were like dangerous, unstable pieces of old machinery. Too strong, too loud, too unpredictable. Myri's parents, Sujin and Dae, were here to try and change that idea. Taeyong was here to make sure nothing happened to them while they tried. The garden door slid open with a quiet hiss. The air in the room seemed to grow colder. Officer Kayla of the Zelnir Dominion entered. The Zelnir were an influential species, proud and strict. They valued absolute order and cleanliness. They saw biology as something to be controlled, and they viewed death worlds and their inhabitants with special disgust. Kayla was tall and elegant, her body covered in a smooth, pearlescent carapace that shone under the lights. Her uniform was a crisp gray, without a single crease. Her 4 dark eyes scanned the room, and her narrow mouth pinched in clear disapproval as she looked at the dirt, the plants, and especially the humans. Myri, wanting to be a good ambassador, saw the officer looking. She stood up, a small smile on her face. She had been taught to be polite. In her hand, she held her little watering cup, which had a bit of mud on the rim. "Hello," Myri said in careful Galactic Common. "My plant is growing. It's from my home." Kayla did not answer. She stared at the child as if Myri were a spider that had just spoken. Myri, thinking the officer hadn't heard, took a step closer. She wanted to show her the sprout. "See?" she said, gesturing with the hand that held the CUP.IT. Happened in a slow, terrible second. As Myri gestured, the edge of the muddy cup lightly brushed against the perfect, gray fabric covering Kayla's lower limb. A look of pure horror and rage twisted Kayla's features. The touch was not hard. It did not hurt, but it was a stain, a violation from a creature she saw as little more than a walking disease. "You filth!" Kayla shrieked, her voice sharp and metallic. "You defile me, you little beast!" Myri's smile vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. She stumbled back. I'm sorry." Taeyong had already pushed himself off the beam. His calm was gone, replaced by a focused intensity. "Officer, step away from the child," he said, his voice low and hard, but Kayla was beyond listening. All she saw was the smudge of earth on her uniform. All she saw was the living symbol of everything her culture despised. With a speed that was shocking, one of her upper limbs snapped forward. It wasn't an open-handed push. It was a stiff, chitinous strike, a backhanded blow meant to punish and destroy. It connected with a sickening, dull thud against the side of Myri's small body. The sound was wrong. It was the sound of force meeting fragile bone. The little girl did not cry out. The air was simply knocked from her lungs in a soft, awful gasp. She was lifted off her feet and thrown sideways, crashing into the clear tank of bubbling nutrient solution. Her head struck the edge with a crack before she slid down into the shallow liquid. Motionless silence crashed down. The only sounds were the hum of the garden lights, the bubble of the tanks, and the slow drip 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 of water from the broken edge. Taeyong was there before the other children could even scream. He dropped to his knees, his large hands hovering over Myri's small, still form. He checked for the pulse in her neck, his fingers gentle but swift. His eyes, when he looked up at Kayla, held no more human emotion than the surface of an asteroid. They were dark and deep and promised something final. Kayla stared back, her own fury now mixed with a flicker of something else. Not regret, but a sudden, cold understanding. She had not just hit a child. She had broken something much bigger. She had torn a silent, invisible agreement. Medical drones whirred into the bay, their red lights painting the green plants in a hellish glow. They gently lifted Myri onto a stretcher. Taeyong stood, his uniform wet from the spilled water and nutrients. He did not speak another word to Kayla. He simply followed the drones, his last glance over his shoulder not at the Zelnir officer, but at the small, trampled sunflower sprout in the dirt by Myri's planter box. The garden, meant to be a symbol of peace, now held a different kind of seed. The silence in the medical bay was thick and cold. It was a different quiet from the garden. That had been a shocked silence. This was the quiet of held breath and waiting. Myri lay on a white bed, surrounded by soft blue light from scanning drones. Her face was pale. A small monitor showed her heartbeat, a fast, fluttering line on the screen. Taeyong stood against the wall, a statue made of shadow. He had not left. His eyes were fixed on the little girl. The calm he wore in the garden was gone. What was left on his face was empty. It was like looking at a deep, still pool where you could not see the bottom. His uniform was still damp where he had knelt beside her. The door opened. 2 people walked in. The first was Captain Park Jun. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He commanded the human contingent on the Harmony's edict. The second was Sujin, Myri's mother. She was a diplomat, always composed, always measured. Now, her composure was a thin sheet of ice over a dark ocean. She went straight to Myri's side, taking her small, limp hand in both of hers. She did not cry. She just held on to a medical officer. A human woman named Dr. Un spoke softly. 2 fractured ribs.
Abruised lung.
A minor concussion from the impact with the tank. She is stable, but she will be in pain. The psychological shock is severe. Sujin nodded once, her jaw tight. She looked at Taeyong. Tell me. Taeyong's voice was flat, without tone. He reported the facts. The garden, the approach, the mud on the cup, Kayla's words, the strike. He did not use adjectives. He did not describe his feelings. He stated events like reading from a list. When he finished, the room felt colder. Captain Jun listened, his arms crossed. The Zelnir have been informed, he said. Their prelate, Vrox, calls it an unfortunate incident. He suggests Officer Kayla may have overreacted to a biological contaminant. They offer to cover medical costs. Sujin's head snapped up. An overreaction? To a spot of dirt. Her voice was a whisper, but it cut the air. She called my daughter a beast. She broke her ribs. The council rules are clear, Jun said, but there was no hope in his voice. Diplomatic staff have broad immunity. A child's word, and even our security footage, against a senior Zelnir officer? It would be taken to a committee, debated for months, maybe a formal reprimand on her record. That is all. Taeyong spoke from his place by the wall. That is not all. Both of them looked at him. He finally moved, pushing himself off the wall. He walked to a console in the room. His big hands tapped a few keys. He pulled up the security feed from the garden. He did not play the part where Myri was hit. He played the moments before. He froze the image. It showed Myri's face, smiling, hopeful, offering her plant. It showed Kayla's face, a mask of pure disgust. He zoomed in. It was all there. The intent, the hatred. It was not an accident. It was a choice. The law sees the action, Taeyong said, his voice still quiet. But we see the truth. She would do it again. She believes she was right. He sent the file to both June and Sujin. This is not for the council, he said. Back on the human decks, the news did not travel like a rumor. It traveled like a current. It moved from person to person in quiet words and locked eyes. In the engineering bay, a woman named Hannah was calibrating a gravity generator. Her partner, Suk, was checking tool inventories. A young comms officer walked in, his face pale. He whispered 3 sentences. Hannah's hands stopped moving. Suk closed the inventory log. They looked at each other. No words were needed. They had both served on the frontier. They knew what the silence from their leaders meant. In the mess hall, the low talk stopped. People finished their meals. They took their plates to the cleaners. They went to their rooms or their posts. There was no shouting. No one slammed a fist on a table. But a tension filled the corridors. A heavy, waiting feeling. It was the feeling before a storm breaks. In his small office, Captain June reviewed the file Taeyong had sent. He looked at the image of Myri's face. He looked at the medical report. He opened a secure channel, a direct line that bypassed all council networks. It used old, simple human codes. He typed a short message. It contained only the facts, the file, and a single question. The answer came back faster than he expected. It was not from a committee. It was not a long document. It was 3 lines from Earth Command. The chain is yours. Consequences are acknowledged. Hold the compact. June read it twice. Then he deleted it. The compact was not a council law. It was an older law, a human law. It was simple. You protect your own. You protect the young. If an enemy violates that, there is no law, no border, no flag that will protect them. He called Sujin and Taeyong back to his office. He did not speak of the message. He did not need to. Sujin, he said, what does diplomacy do when words are useless? Sujin stood straight. The grief in her eyes had hardened into something sharp and clear. It steps aside, she said. June nodded. He looked at Taeyong. We will request a meeting, a security adjudication, on their turf, in the council's own justice hall. We will go through their channels. We will wear our uniforms. Taeyong met his gaze. And then June said, we will show them the price of the compact. We will show them what consequences acknowledged means. Outside, in the endless night of space, the Harmony's edict sailed on, a bubble of light and order. Inside, in the human section, a different order was being restored. An old one, a quiet one. It was the sound of tools being checked, of boots being laced tight, of a community without a single spoken command, deciding that the time for talking was over. The human decks were quiet. The normal sounds were still there, the hum of the air filters, the soft buzz of the lights. But the other sounds, the talk and the movement were gone. It was a deep, purposeful quiet in her small room. Hannah cleaned a tool. It was not a weapon. It was a length of high-tensile filament wire, used for slicing through composite hull materials in emergency repairs. She ran a cloth along its edge with careful, precise strokes. On her bunk, Suk checked the power cells of 2 small devices. They looked like communication pads, but they were not. They were shock emitters, designed to overload a nervous system with a painful, disorienting jolt. They were tools for crowd control meant to create space, not to kill. He tested each one, the light on the side glowing a faint, brief blue. They did not talk about what they were doing. They did not need to. The news about Myri had been a spark, and the silence from their leaders had been the wind. Every human on the ship understood. They had all seen the looks from the Zelnir and others. They had all heard the whispers of Deathworlder, like it was a dirty word. This was not just about one little girl. It was about all of them. In the medical bay, Myri slept. The drugs made her dreams fuzzy and kept the pain away. Her mother, Sujin, sat beside her. She no longer held Myri's hand. Instead, she held a datapad. On it, she reviewed not the medical files but the formal Galactic Council legal codes. She read the sections on diplomatic immunity and assault. Her face was calm, but her eyes moved quickly, absorbing every detail. She was looking for the holes, the weaknesses, the places where their own actions would later need to be explained. Captain June was in his office. He drafted the formal request for a meeting. His words were perfect. He used the correct titles. He cited the proper regulations. He requested an immediate security adjudication concerning the regrettable incident in the hydroponics bay. He asked for Officer Kayla and her superior, Prelate Vrox, to be present so that clarification might be achieved and procedural harmony restored. It was the kind of boring, official language the council loved. It sounded like surrender. He sent it. The reply from Prelate Vrox came quickly. It agreed. The tone was dismissive. Vrox seemed to think the humans were following procedure to save face, to make a show of protest before accepting their loss. The meeting was set for the next shift cycle, in the Justice Hall on the Council command deck. June leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about the message from Earth Command. The chain is yours. It meant he was in command, and the responsibility was his. Consequences are acknowledged. It meant they knew what he might do and they accepted it. They would not help him, but they would not stop him either. He stood up and walked to the door. He went out into the quiet corridor. He walked past the closed doors of rooms where his people were. He did not knock. He did not call a meeting. He simply walked. And as he walked, doors opened. Hannah stepped out, her tool wire now coiled neatly and hidden in a seam of her uniform. Suk followed, the shock emitters out of sight. Others appeared. A woman named Yuri, a structural engineer. A man named Jean, a life support technician. They did not carry guns. They carried the tools of their trades or nothing at all. They fell into step behind June, saying nothing. They walked to the main gathering room. It was not full, but every human not on critical duty was there. They stood, waiting. June stopped at the front. He looked at their faces. He saw no anger. He saw no fear. He saw only a grim, patient certainty. They were like stone. They have agreed to the meeting, June said, his voice carrying in the quiet. We will go to their justice hall. We will use their rules, right up until their rules no longer matter. A man in the back, an older botanist who had helped Myri with her seeds, spoke softly. And the child? June met his eyes. The compact is clear. An attack on our youngest is an attack on our future. It is an attack on all of us. It cannot be answered with a fine or an apology. A low murmur went through the room. It was not agreement because agreement was not needed. It was recognition. They all knew the old, unwritten law. It was older than spaceships, older than nations. It was the law of the pack, the family, the tribe. You protect the cubs, or you do not survive. Sujin, Taeyong, Hannah, Suk, June said. You will come with me. We will be the delegation. The rest of you will stay here. You will lock down our decks. You will let no one in or out until we return. You will monitor all communications. If we do not return, you will know what it means, and you will act as you see fit. No one asked what that meant. Everyone understood. If the 5 did not return, it meant the council had chosen sides. It meant the Harmony's edict was now a battlefield. June looked at Taeyong last. The big man had not moved. He stood like a pillar. Taeyong, June said, you understand the task? Taeyong nodded once. I understand the target. The quiet in the room deepened. There was no hate in his words. There was only a terrible clarity. Then we go, June said. We go politely. We go quietly. We show them the face they expect to see. And then we show them the truth. The group broke apart. The 5 who were going moved to the airlock that led to the main ship corridors. They did not look like warriors. They looked like tired diplomats and their staff. Their uniforms were clean. Their faces were calmed as the airlock door opened. June paused. He looked back at his people, standing silently in the gathering room. They were cooks, engineers, scientists, clerks. But in that moment they were all one thing. They were Deathworlders. And their patience had run out. He gave a single, short nod. Then he turned and led his 4 people out into the bright, cold light of the Galactic Council's ship. The corridors of the Council command deck were wide and beautiful. The light was a soft, golden color. The air smelled clean like nothing at all. Pictures of stars and peaceful meetings hung on the walls. It was a place meant to feel safe and important. Captain June walked at the front. His steps were even. His hands were relaxed at his sides. Behind him, Sujin walked with a datapad held to her chest. Her face was the polite, empty mask of a diplomat. To her right, Taeyong moved. He seemed smaller here, his shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes looking down. He played the part of a quiet guard. No threat to anyone. Hannah and Suk were last. They looked like junior aides, curious about their surroundings. Their eyes, however, were not curious. They were counting steps. They noted the positions of the security cameras. They saw the 2 Zelnir guards standing outside a large, arched door ahead. The Justice Hall. This was the enemy's place. Every rule here was their rule. Every advantage was theirs. The humans had no visible weapons. They were outnumbered. They were on display. It was exactly where June wanted to be. The 2 Zelnir guards straightened as they approached. Their dark eyes looked over the humans with cool disinterest. One spoke, his voice a dry rustle. "You are expected. Prelate Vrox is inside. You will keep the discussion orderly." June gave a small, correct bow of his head. "Of course. We seek only clarity." The large doors slid open without a sound. The Justice Hall was a round room with a high ceiling. In the center was a wide, circular table made of a smooth, blue stone. The walls showed shifting images of peaceful galaxies. It was a room designed to make people feel small and to make problems seem manageable. Prelate Vrox stood on the far side of the table. He was taller than Kayla, his carapace a darker gray, like old metal. He had the calm look of someone who had already won. Beside him stood Officer Kayla. She had changed her uniform. It was spotless again. She held herself straight, her chin raised. She looked at the entering humans as if they were stains on the floor. 2 more Zelnir guards stood against the wall behind them. They were armed with small energy weapons on their belts. They looked alert, but not worried. "Captain June," Vrox said. His voice filled the quiet room. "We meet under unfortunate stars. Let us be brief. Officer Kayla has submitted her report. She reacted to an unprovoked biological contamination from an uncontrolled juvenile. The incident, while regrettable in its intensity, was a lawful decontamination action." Sujin's polite mask did not slip. She placed her datapad on the table. "A lawful action? To fracture a child's ribs for a speck of soil?" Kayla's eyes flashed. "The soil of a death world is a vector for 1,000 pathogens. The child was not controlled. My response was within safety protocols to protect the ship's biosphere." June did not look at her. He looked at Vrox. "And the Council's view? Does your safety protocol allow for the breaking of children?" Vrox waved a hand, a slow, dismissive gesture. "The Council understands that different species have different sensitivities. The child will heal. Officer Kayla will be reminded of proportional response. We consider the matter settled. We will, as a gesture of goodwill, cover the medical costs." He said it like he was giving them a gift, like he was tossing a scrap to a dog. This was the moment. This was the wall. The humans had come to this room knowing there would be no justice here. Now they had their confirmation. The quiet in their own hearts hardened into something solid and final. June nodded slowly, as if considering the offer. He looked down at the smooth table. "Settled," he repeated softly. Then he looked up. His face changed. The polite, tired captain was gone. What remained was something older and colder. "Your laws have no rule for this," June said, his voice now clear and hard. "You broke the only compact that matters to us." Prelate Vrox frowned, confused by the tone. "What compact? What are you talking about?" Sujin answered. Her voice was like ice. "The compact that says you do not touch our children. You broke it, so now you live under our law." Kayla let out a sharp, mocking sound. Your law? You are on a council ship. You're primitive. She did not finish. June gave a single, sharp nod. Was not a signal of attack. It was a signal of release. The humans moved. They did not shout. They did not run. They moved with a silence that was more frightening than any roar. Hannah and Suk were closest to the two guards by the wall. Their hands came up from their sides. The small shock emitters were now visible. There were two soft crack hiss sounds. The devices did not shoot beams. They created a sudden, painful burst of energy in the air right in front of the guards' heads. The effect was instant. Both Zelnir guards shuddered, their limbs locking up. They made choked, gurgling noises and collapsed to their knees, blind and disoriented. Their weapons untouched on their belts. The same moment, Taeyong moved forward. He was no longer hunched. He seemed to grow, his shoulders widening, his movement smooth and fast like flowing water. He walked straight toward Kayla. Prelate Vrock stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. Guards! Stop them! This is an outrage! But the guards were writhing on the floor. Hannah and Suk stepped over them, not to fight, but to block the door. They unspooled the fine, glinting wire from their hands. They did not approach Vrox. They simply stood between him and the exit, their faces calm. They were not his executioners. They were his witnesses. Kayla saw Taeyong coming. She was not afraid. She was a trained officer. She was strong. She hissed and lunged at him, her chitinous limbs slicing through the air toward his head. It was a killing strike. Taeyong did not block it. He moved inside the strike. He turned his body, letting her limb pass over his shoulder. With one hand, he grabbed her attacking limb at the joint. With his other hand, he struck her center of mass, not to hurt her, but to push her balance away. Kayla staggered back, surprised by his speed and the solid, unyielding strength of him. She was used to fighting beings who tried to match her strength. Taeyong did not match it. He used it against her. He was a man who had trained under heavier gravity. Her own momentum was his weapon. She tried to recover, to bring her other limbs into play. But Taeyong was already there. He had not come to fight her. He had come to end her, from a clip on his belt. His hand drew a tool. It was about the length of his forearm. It looked like a black metal rod, simple and unmarked. It was not a laser blade. It was something heavier, denser. It was made from a piece of an Earth asteroid, forged under immense pressure. It was a tool for prying, for breaking, for surviving. It had a sharpened edge on one end. Kayla saw it. For the first time, real fear touched her eyes. She tried to scramble back, to put the stone table between them. She was too slow. Taeyong took one final, long step. His movement had no anger in it. It had the terrible, clean efficiency of a falling tree. As Kayla turned to flee, he swung the tool. It was not a wild chop. It was a precise, horizontal arc. The dense, super hard edge met the joint between her head and her body carapace. There was a sound, a sharp, final crack, like stone breaking. Then silence. Kayla's body took one more stumbling step before it crumpled to the floor. Her head rolled a short distance across the smooth, blue stone, coming to a stop near Prelate Vrox's feet. The prelate stared down at it, his body frozen. He could not look away. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Taeyong stood over the body. He looked at Vrox. His voice was quiet, flat, and filled the entire horrible room. The compact is clear. You threaten our youngest, you forfeit all sanctuary. Even here, even now, this is the lesson you failed to learn. The golden light of the Justice Hall shone down on the scene. The peaceful galaxies still turned on the walls. Nothing in this room of civilized law had prepared anyone for this. For the quiet, absolute fury of a death world. The silence in the Justice Hall was absolute. The only sound was the low hum of the ship and the soft, ragged breathing of Prelate Vrox. He stared at the head of his officer lying near his feet. His mind could not understand it. His eyes saw it, but his thoughts were empty. This was not possible. Not here. Not in this room of law and light. Taeyong stood still. He looked down at the tool in his hand. The edge was clean. He knelt and wiped it once on the fabric of Kayla's uniform. Then he stood and placed the tool back on the clip on his belt. It was a simple movement, like putting away a wrench after a job was done. Captain June walked forward. He did not look at the body. He walked to the circular table and placed his hands flat on the cool, blue stone. He looked at Prelate Vrox. "The adjudication is complete," June said. His voice was calm, like a teacher explaining a lesson. "Human sovereignty law has been applied. The threat to our people has been neutralized." Vrox finally found his voice. It was a thin, shaky sound. "Murder. This is murder. You will be torn apart. Your species will be ejected into the void." He tried to step back but stumbled. Hannah and Suk still stood by the door, their wire held loosely. They did not move to stop him. They just watched. Sujin picked up her datapad from the table. Her fingers moved across its surface. "This was not murder, Prelate. It was a frontier execution, authorized under Article 7 of our Independent Survival Statutes. The compact we cited." She turned the pad around. On its screen was not a legal document, but a picture. It was the security feed image. Myri's hopeful, smiling face next to Kayla's mask of disgust. The evidence of intent was clear. "Your officer declared our child a beast and a source of filth." She stated her belief that violence was a proper decontamination protocol. She was a continuing threat. The sentence for such a threat, under our laws, is death. You cannot bring your savage laws here." Vrox spat, but the fear was thick in his voice. "We just did," June said. He tapped a command into his own wrist comm, "and we are not done. The proceedings are being filed. Now." Throughout the human decks, the order was given. Every piece of data was sent, not just the garden feed. They sent the medical scans of Myri's broken ribs. They sent records of 100 smaller things. Logs of Zelnir crew members refusing to share lift cars with humans. Records of human food shipments being delayed for biosecurity review. Reports of human children being called vermin in the corridors. They bundled it all into one tight, undeniable package. It was not an excuse. It was an explanation. It showed a pattern. It showed a poison that had been growing, ignored by the Council. On the bridge of the Harmony's edict, the human communications officer, a young man named Min, sent the package. He sent it on every channel. To the Council High Command. To every ambassador's ship. To the Zelnir Dominion fleet. He sent it as an official human diplomatic corps communique, marked with the highest priority. It was a broadcast, could not be ignored. Back in the Justice Hall, alarms began to sound. Soft, polite chimes at first, then louder ones. Lights on the wall flashed blue. The Council had received the data. The ship was moving to a security alert. The 2 Zelnir guards on the floor were starting to recover. They groaned, pushing themselves up onto their hands and knees. They saw Kayla's body. They froze. "Take your prelate and leave," Hannah said to them, her voice quiet but clear. "The business here is finished." The guards looked at Vrox, then at the humans. They saw no rage on the human faces. They saw only a cold, finished certainty. One guard slowly got to his feet. He helped Vrox, who was still trembling, to stand. The other guard could not look away from Kayla's head. They did not try to fight. They did not try to grab their weapons. The fight had been taken out of them. They half-carried Vrox toward the door. Hannah and Suk stepped aside to let them pass. The humans were alone in the Justice Hall with the body. Taeyong looked at June. "They will come. With real soldiers." June nodded. "I know. They will have to decide what to do next. That is the point." Sujin walked over to the large doors. She did not close them. She left them wide open. The scene inside was now visible to the corridor. The silent hall. The body on the floor. The 5 humans standing calmly in the center. It was a stark, horrifying picture. They did not barricade themselves. They did not prepare more weapons. June walked to the head of the table and sat down in one of the chairs. Sujin sat beside him. Taeyong, Hannah, and Suk took up positions standing behind them. They waited. It did not take long. The sound of running feet came from the corridor. A squad of the ship's security forces appeared at the door. They were not Zelnir. They were a mixed group from different species, wearing the silver and blue of the council. They had proper rifles. They stopped dead when they saw what was inside the room. Their weapons came up, but their faces were confused. They were not facing a riot. They were facing 5 calm people and a dead body. The squad leader, a tall being with smooth green skin, stepped forward. His weapon was aimed at June. "Captain June, you are all under arrest. Stand up slowly with your hands visible." June looked at him. He did not stand. "On what charge?" The squad leader blinked. On the charge of killing a council officer." June shook his head slowly. "We have filed our judicial findings with the council. This was a lawful execution under human sovereignty law, enacted in response to an unlawful and deadly assault on a human child. We have submitted all evidence. We await the council's review of that evidence before we move from this room." The squad leader stared. He had been trained for fights, for riots, for arrests. He had not been trained for this. A calm man citing laws after a beheading. He listened to the words coming through his earpiece. His orders were changing by the second. He lowered his rifle slightly. You cannot just stay here. We can," Sujin said. "And we will, until the council acknowledges our filing. Until they understand that the next group that comes through that door will decide if this incident ends here, or if it becomes a war on this ship. Tell them to choose very, very carefully." Her words hung in the air. The squad leader looked from their calm faces to the body on the floor. He looked at the open data files now flashing on screens all over the ship. He understood. This was not a crime scene. It was a statement. A line drawn in blood that he spoke into his calm. His voice low and urgent. He then gestured to his squad. They did not enter the room. They did not try to arrest anyone. Instead, they took positions outside the open door. They became guards, not for the council, but for the terrible, quiet tableau inside. The humans waited. They had done what they came to do. Now they would wait for the galaxy to understand the new, simple rule they had just written. Time passed slowly in the Justice Hall. The alarms had stopped. The polite chimes were silent. Now there was only the waiting. The open doors showed the corridor outside, now filled with a tense crowd of silver-clad council security. They did not point their weapons into the room anymore. They just stood there, a wall of confused and anxious faces. They looked at the 5 humans and looked away, as if the sight burned their eyes. Inside, nothing moved. Captain June sat straight in his chair. Sujin's hands were folded on the table. Behind them, Taeyong, Hannah, and Suk stood like statues made of shadow and bone. Their eyes were not on the guards. Their eyes were on nothing. They were focused inward, conserving every bit of energy, every thought. They had made their move. The next move had to come from outside. All over the Harmony's edict, the human data packet was doing its work. On the bridge, council commanders argued. Some demanded an immediate armed assault on the Justice Hall. Others, having seen the video of the smiling child and the medical scans, urged caution. A Zelnir admiral screamed for vengeance. A Talkiri ambassador pointed out that the humans had not attacked the guards. They had only killed the one who hurt the child. The distinction was terrible, but it was important. The packet went further. It reached other ships. It reached homeworlds. On Earth, the message was received in silence. No celebrations. No threats. The news simply spread. A child was hurt. The response was given. The waiting began. In the medical bay, Myri's father, Day, sat by her bed. He held her hand. He had seen the alert. He knew what it meant. He looked at his daughter's small, sleeping face. A single tear traced a line down his cheek. It was not a tear of sadness for what had been done. It was a tear of fear for what might come next, and a tear of a terrible, dark pride that his people had not looked away. Back in the Justice Hall, the first real response arrived. It was not a soldier. It was a messenger. A young council aide, her skin pale, walked slowly to the open door. She carried a data slate. She stopped at the threshold, afraid to step on the blood on the floor. "Captain June," she said, her voice trembling. "The High Council has received your filing. They request your delegation to stand down and submit to arrest pending a full, formal inquiry." June did not move. "Request denied," he said. His voice was flat. "The judicial action is complete. There is no human to arrest for performing a lawful duty. We will leave this room when we receive formal council acknowledgement of our submitted evidence and a guarantee of safe passage back to our decks. Not before." The aide swallowed. They will not give that. You have killed someone." Sujin spoke without turning her head. "And they will kill 5 more? Then 20? Then 100? How many humans on this ship do they think they will have to kill to end this? And what will happen when the news reaches our fleet that the Council executed officers for defending a child?" The aide had no answer. She looked lost. She stepped back and spoke into her calm. More time passed. The tension in the corridor grew. The guards shifted on their feet. They were not facing monsters. They were facing something worse. People who were utterly sure they were right. People who had already shown they were willing to do the unthinkable. Then, a new figure arrived. It was Prelate Vrox. He had returned. But he was different. He walked slowly. His proud posture was gone. He looked old. He stopped well outside the door. He would not look at the spot where Kayla had fallen. "June," Vrox said. The anger was gone from his voice. Now there was only a hollow tiredness. "This madness must stop. You have made your point. Terrible point. Now stand down, and we can find a solution." June finally turned his head. He looked at Vrox. "There is no solution with you, Prelate. Only a lesson. Have you learned it?" Vrox's face tightened. "You speak as if you have one. You are surrounded. Your people are locked in their decks. You have no leverage." Taeyong spoke for the first time in an hour. His voice was a low rumble in the quiet room. "You are wrong. We have all the leverage." He took one step forward. The guards in the corridor flinched, their weapons twitching upward. Taeyong ignored them. He pointed a finger not at Vrox, but at the wall, at the ship around them. "This ship is a city of peace," Taeyong said. "It has thin walls. It has delicate systems. It has thousands of people who have never seen real violence." He paused. "My people are engineers, and mechanics, and cooks. They are in every part of this ship right now. They are in the engine rooms. They are in the life support control. They are in the wiring conduits. You have them locked down. But locks can be broken from the inside." The blood drained from Vrox's face. He understood. It was not a threat of attack. It was a threat of collapse. The humans would not fight their way out. They would simply stop the ship from working. They would turn off the lights. They would shut down the air. They would do it quietly, from the inside. "You would kill everyone?" Vrox whispered, horrified. "No," June said. "We would survive. Our decks are hardened. Our people are trained for emergency shelter. We can last longer in the dark and the cold than you can. That is what a death world is, Prelate. It is not about being angry. It is about being able to wait in the silence for the storm to pass. Are you able to wait?" The question hung in the air. Vrox looked from June's cold eyes to the body on the floor. He saw the future in that moment. He saw committees and debates and then, eventually, the silent, grinding sabotage. He saw his beautiful ship dying around him. He saw the human decks, sealed and silent, outlasting them all. That he was a politician. He understood power, and he finally saw the true power here. It was not in the weapons. It was in the willingness to endure, to sit in a room with a corpse and wait, to have your people ready to sit in the dark. Vrox's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked at the council security commander beside him. He gave a small, defeated wave of his hand. "Clear the corridor," Vrox said, his voice a broken thing. Give the human delegation escort back to their decks. No one is to touch them. No one is to speak to them. He looked at June one last time, his eyes filled with a new, awful understanding. The evidence will be reviewed. The incident is sealed under galactic security protocols. There will be no sanctions. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The security commander stared after him, then back at the humans. He gave a sharp order. The wall of guards parted, creating a path. June stood up. Sujin stood. They did not smile. They did not show relief. They simply walked toward the door. Taeyong, Hannah, and Suk fell in behind them. They walked through the silent corridor, past the staring guards. No one moved to stop them. The humans walked back the way they had come, their steps even and measured. They had entered as supplicants. They were leaving as something else entirely. They were leaving as a fact. A terrible, simple fact that the galaxy would now have to learn to live with. The walk back was silent. The humans did not speak. They did not look at the beings who watched them from open doorways or who stopped in the corridors to stare. The stares were different now. There was no disgust in them. There was no pity. There was only a kind of frightened awe. The news had spread. Everyone knew what had happened in the Justice Hall. They looked at the 5 humans and saw not people but a force of nature, something that could not be argued with. They reached the airlock that led to the human decks. The council security guards stopped following. They stood back, a careful 10 steps away. They watched as the heavy door slid open. The other side was not what the guards expected. They thought they might see a celebration. They thought they might see armed humans ready for a fight. Instead, they saw a simple corridor. It was clean and quiet. A few people stood there, waiting. An engineer in her work clothes. A cook with his apron still on. They did not cheer. They just nodded as June and the others stepped through. The door closed, sealing with a solid thump. Inside, the quiet was a living thing. It was the quiet of a held breath finally being let out. People came out of rooms. They filled the corridor. They looked at their captain, at Sujin, at Taeyong. No one asked what happened. They could see it on their faces. They could see the dried flecks of blood on Taeyong's trousers. Captain June looked at his people. "It is done," he said, his voice rough from the long silence. "The council has backed down. They will not act. Myri's attacker is dead. The compact is upheld." A low murmur went through the crowd. It was not a sound of joy. It was a sound of grim satisfaction. A necessary job was finished. Then, slowly, the crowd began to break up. People went back to their work. The engineer returned to her panel. The cook went back to his kitchen. Life on the human decks returned to its normal rhythms. But the air was different. It was lighter, and yet heavier at the same time. Taeyong did not go with the others. He walked down a side corridor to the medical bay. He paused at the door and wiped his hands on a clean cloth from a dispenser on the wall. He took a deep breath, and the hard set of his shoulders softened, just a little. Inside, Myri was awake. She was propped up on pillows. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were clear. Her father, Dae, sat beside her. Sujin arrived just behind Taeyong and went straight to her daughter's side, kissing her forehead. Taeyong stood near the foot of the bed. He looked at the little girl. "How is the flower?" he asked, his voice now gentle. Myri gave a small smile. "The doctor said it got stepped on. But Appa says maybe the roots are still good. We can try again." Taeyong nodded slowly. "Good. The roots are important." He did not come closer. He did not try to touch her. He just stood there, a solid, quiet presence. Myri looked at him and then at her mother. She didn't know what had happened, but she felt the change in the air. She felt safe. "Thank you, Taeyong Ajusi," she whispered. He gave a single, small bow of his head. Then he turned and left. His part was over. In his office, Captain June sent one last, encrypted message to Earth Command. It contained only 3 words. "Compact upheld. Stand by." The reply was just as short. "Acknowledged." He deleted both. He looked at the reports coming in from the rest of the ship. The official story was being formed. Officer Kayla was killed in a tragic security incident during a tense diplomatic meeting. The matter is closed to protect interspecies harmony. The Zelnir were furious, but they were alone in their fury. No other species supported them. They had seen the evidence. They had calculated the risk. The cost of avenging Kayla was too high. In the days that followed, a new caution took hold on the Harmony's edict. When humans walked the main corridors, others gave them space. Not out of hatred, but out of a deep, instinctual respect. Conversations stopped when a human entered a common room, not from rudeness, but from a sudden awareness. The subtle bullying ended. The accidental shoves in line stopped. The complaints about human food smells vanished. It was not friendship. It was a cold, practical understanding. The humans had drawn a line in the most undeniable way possible. They had shown that their patience was long, but their response, once triggered, was absolute and terrifyingly simple. Sujin returned to her diplomatic work. Her negotiations were different now. When she spoke, people listened more carefully. They did not dismiss her points. They considered them, because they knew what stood behind her words. It was not just a government. It was a people who had looked into the abyss of conflict and had not blinked. One evening, Taeyong walked back to the hydroponic garden. It had been cleaned. The broken tank was repaired. In the corner, he saw a new planter box. Inside, a fresh green sunflower sprout pushed toward the lights. Someone had replanted it. He stood there for a long time, looking at it. He remembered the sound, the crack, the silence. He felt no pride. He felt no regret. He felt only the heavy weight of a job that had needed doing. He was a tool that had been used, and now he was being put away. He reached out a single, thick finger and very gently touched a leaf of the new sprout. It was soft and green and full of life. Then he turned off the light and left the garden in peaceful darkness. The ship sailed on through the silent stars, carrying its new and uneasy peace. The humans had not won a war. They had taught a single, brutal lesson, and the galaxy, holding its breath, had begun to learn.